The most ruthless display of power is not destruction. It isn't confrontation. It isn't revenge. It is silence. It is disappearance. It is walking away without an ending, without an explanation, without closure. Machiavelli understood that human beings are not truly addicted to pleasure, nor even to love. What they are addicted to is certainty. The mind longs for resolution. It craves a clear ending, a box to neatly place events into. Without that, people unravel. They replay the story endlessly. They search desperately for meaning. They cannot let go. That is why refusing closure becomes one of the most devastating psychological weapons you can ever wield. Because closure brings peace. Without it, people remain in turmoil. And that turmoil leaves them permanently vulnerable to your presence. Most assume they want happiness, but in reality, what they desire most are answers. To know why things happened, to know where they stand, to know how the story ends. Imagine someone abandoned with no explanation. Outwardly their life may seem fine, but inwardly their mind is still shackled to that single question. Why? That question is leverage. To give closure is to set them free. You cut the rope, you untie the knot. They walk away calmer, lighter, unburdened. But if you withhold answers, they cannot walk away. You live in their thoughts. You own their attention. This is why Machiavelli would warn, never explain more than you must. The more you explain, the more you free them. The less you explain, the more you remain with them. A complete story dies. An incomplete story lives forever. Shakespeare's plays concluded. Machiavelli's lessons never truly ended. Why? Because Machiavelli wrote in principles, not finalities. His words invite endless reinterpretation. They refuse to close, which is why his influence still lingers centuries later. The same law applies to people. Never hand them the last page. When you shout everything you feel, explain yourself fully, slam the door, that person will rest easily a week later. But when you leave quietly, saying nothing, leaving them unsure whether you are angry, whether you will return, whether they matter to you at all, then they will never rest peacefully again. The unfinished always holds more power than the finished, because the mind cannot abandon an unsolved puzzle. Machiavelli wrote that it is often wiser to appear less transparent than you are. When you leave people uncertain, they begin working for you. If you do not explain, they invent explanations. If you do not reveal your intentions, they imagine your next move. If you do not grant closure, they rewrite the story 1,000 ways in their heads. Each version they invent keeps you alive in their mind. They cannot escape you. And the beauty is this: while they waste their energy spinning theories, you move on freely, untouched by their chaos. You are already gone, but they remain prisoners of the absence you left behind. Look at how often people cry for closure in relationships, in betrayal, in conflict. They beg for honesty. They beg to understand. But what they are really begging is, please release me. They think truth will heal them. They do not realize that closure is often just a final illusion. A plea for closure is really a plea to be freed from your hold, and if you give it, you surrender leverage. If you withhold it, you remain the one they cannot stop circling back to. Machiavelli would say, if you want control, never give people the key to their own escape. We live in a culture obsessed with clean endings. Be transparent, communicate, provide closure. But ask yourself, who does this serve? Closure serves them, not you. It grants them peace, it grants them freedom, it lets them walk away satisfied. Why should you give them that gift? If they have wronged you, betrayed you, or underestimated you, silence is sharper, colder, and more unforgettable than words. You do not curse them, you do not shout, you do not explain, you simply leave. And now they are left forever carrying the weight of an unfinished sentence. Every explanation you give is a rope you hand them. With enough rope, they climb out of confusion and escape you. Machiavelli would advise, never over-explain. Say less than you know, reveal less than you think, leave gaps in every story, because the mind cannot stand gaps. It fills them with imagination, paranoia, and endless replaying. And imagination is always crueler than reality. Silence turns their own mind into your weapon. Consider the lover. You end things with a long explanation. They cry, process, and heal. Months later, they move on. But if you leave without a word, only questions remain. They never stop thinking of you. They wonder if you will return. They wonder what they did wrong. You linger in every relationship that follows the enemy. You fight back, shouting all your reasons. They know exactly why you cut them off. Closure gives them justification to hate you, but if you leave without a sound, they're trapped replaying the fight in their own head. They can't prepare for you because they have no idea what you're planning. The colleague, you explain why you disagree. They nod. They accept. The conflict ends. But if you say nothing, if you let the tension hang and never clarify, they spend weeks second-guessing what you think of them. Their uncertainty becomes your control. Fear fades. Threats weaken. Even pain softens with time. But uncertainty lingers forever. The absence of closure keeps the wound open because the mind doesn't know how to seal it shut. It bleeds every time the thought resurfaces, and people cannot stop returning to the thought. This is why Machiavelli would say, closure is mercy, and mercy dissolves power. Withhold it. When you deny closure, you deny peace, and without peace, they stay bound to you. So what is the real lesson here? If you want power, never give peace. If you want control, never give the ending they crave. Silence, mystery, absence, these are your sharpest weapons. Not because they destroy people directly, but because they leave people destroying themselves in your name. And when their own mind becomes your guard, you've mastered one of the darkest and most effective laws of psychological leverage. A clean ending is freedom. An unfinished story is captivity. Closure allows people to rebuild, but suspense keeps them circling, searching, obsessing. That is the essence of Machiavelli's law of psychological leverage. You don't wound people by striking them. You wound them by never finishing the sentence, by leaving their mind running laps in your silence, always behind, always chasing a version of you that no longer exists. Because once you leave them without closure, they do the rest themselves. They invent reasons. They blame you. They blame themselves. They rewrite the past. They reach out. They plot revenge. And eventually, they spiral back into dependence. Meanwhile, you, the one who walked away, lift no finger. You've already won. Here lies the secret. When you deny closure, you create imbalance. You walk away complete. They walk away undone. That unfinished loop rules their subconscious even when they pretend it doesn't. They say they've moved on. They act like they don't care. They laugh, post, talk. But it's performance, because the real story never ended. The balance shifts. You're silent, they're speaking in monologues. You've closed the file, they're stuck rereading the same page. This imbalance is not cruelty, it is advantage. Machiavelli would not call this manipulation but positioning. You keep power not by controlling their actions directly, but by remaining the unanswered question in their mind. As long as they wonder about you, you control the field. One of the most ruthless uses of this law is what we now call ghosting. But ghosting is not always immaturity. It can be sharpened into a weapon. Used with intention, it becomes a tool of disorientation and control. Here's how. You create a connection, fast, deep, consuming. You mirror their emotions, reflect their needs, bond intensely. And then you disappear. No argument, no goodbye, no closure, just silence. Now they're trapped in a vacuum, emotionally burning with nowhere to go. They analyze endlessly, blame themselves, feel abandoned. And you're untouchable, everywhere and nowhere, a phantom in their psyche. The result? They dream of you. They hate you. They want to fix it. They stalk your movements. They build stories where they win you back. Every bit of energy flows toward you. And that energy is leverage. It doesn't matter if it's love or hate. Obsession is still obedience. To master this at the highest level, you don't vanish randomly. You design the moment of departure. Step 1. Give them an emotional high. Right before you vanish, give them deep praise, intense passion, or raw vulnerability. This creates contrast, and contrast imprints memory. Step 2. Disappear at the peak. Most leave during decline. You leave when things are perfect. The mind cannot process the break. Now they're addicted to a high that never concluded. Step 3. Say nothing. Not, "I can't do this." Not, "I need space." Not even, "It's not you." Nothing. The less you give, the more their imagination takes over. Silence fuels projection. Step 4. Reappear lightly, if you choose. A brief like, a vague emoji, a short line. Just enough to stir the ashes so they ignite themselves. You are neither hero nor villain. You become the unresolved character, and unresolved characters live longer in the mind than anyone else. Here's the psychological twist. People who don't get closure don't only suffer, they often return. Not to fix things, not always for revenge, but because they crave resolution, and their mind whispers, "You need to go back and finish this properly." But there is no finish. That's the design. So they reach out, and when they do, they come weakened. They no longer negotiate from strength, they negotiate from confusion. You now hold positional advantage, emotional distance, and narrative control. They think about you. You haven't thought about them. That gap is the root of psychological dominance. Machiavelli's philosophy was not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was about control, placing yourself so others must always respond to you, never the reverse. Refusing to give closure fits that doctrine perfectly. When you leave someone unresolved, you force them into your tempo. You make them internalize you. You erode their sense of agency. You weave yourself into their emotional framework. From there, even your silence becomes an order. You never ask for loyalty, and they give it. You never demand attention, and they focus on you. You never explain your leaving, and they chase your reasons. This is not reckless emotion. This is cold, strategic leverage. Influence that can't be bought, taught, or faked. It's won with one brutal decision. Don't explain. Don't finish the story. Leave the door ajar and let them wonder forever. The mind cannot accept what it cannot complete. People don't need permission to hate you, but they need permission to forget you. If you withhold that permission, you become part of their identity. Not a memory, but a scar, a reference point that follows them everywhere. Machiavelli's real genius wasn't just in creating obsession. It was in placing that obsession where others would defend you, serve you, and chase you in your absence. That's where psychological leverage becomes political. It stops being about one person and becomes about controlling the room by controlling how your silence is read. To do that, master the interplay of closure, status, and social scarcity. When someone lacks closure from you, they look for it elsewhere, to other people. They talk, they speculate. Have you heard from them? What do you think they meant? Every question spreads your name, not because you're present, but because you're unresolved. That creates social gravity. Your absence becomes an event. People orbit it. They whisper, they guess, they invent stories. And here's the Machiavellian part. You didn't demand attention, you didn't explain, you barely showed up. Yet your silence now steers the conversation. They aren't merely gossiping, they are branding you. You become an image, not a person, and images are harder to kill than people. Scarcity increases value. What's rare becomes precious. What's inaccessible becomes desirable. What vanishes without warning becomes unforgettable. When you disappear without closure, you forge psychological and social scarcity. People say, "He doesn't speak to anyone anymore. She just vanished." They don't have answers, so the mystery builds your reputation. Even if they resent you, they respect the control you wield. They wonder, What does that person know that I don't? Why are they so composed? Why don't they need to explain themselves? That wonder is obedience in disguise. It signals you have transcended the need for validation. When others still crave closure, you rise above them, not by rank, but by emotional independence, a rare trait that gains value like a rare metal. Here's the paradox Machiavelli would relish. The more confused someone is about you, the more they publicly reaffirm loyalty just to make sense of themselves. They may not know where they stand, they may feel ignored or misunderstood, but admitting they never got closure would force them to concede they weren't important enough. So instead, they defend you, portraying your disappearance as mystery, intelligence, or principled distance. They do your PR to save face. That's leverage you can't buy. And you never spoke. Machiavelli would call this untouchable legitimacy. It isn't granted, it's felt, and it's built through contradiction. Be present yet distant, remembered yet unreachable, respected but unavailable, admired but never fully understood. That balance creates an emotional mirage. People will chase you, speak of you, swear loyalty, and still never reach you. And because you never give closure, they never stop reaching. The chase becomes their prison. You hold the keys, and they cherish the cell because the pain of indifference is far greater than captivity. This is how emotional confusion transforms into ritualized loyalty. They will scroll through your messages years later. They will replay your words. They will dissect your silences. And eventually, they will pass on your legend to others just to justify their own unfinished story. Once this effect is created, the cycle of confusion, loyalty, and speculation, your only task is to protect it with silence. Never ruin it with clarity. Never attempt to correct the narrative. Never explain yourself later. And if you do return, return without answers. If you speak, speak without explanations. If they ask, smile and say, some things don't need to be said. Guard your silhouette. Never step into full view, for the power was never in what you did. It was in what you withheld. Closure would collapse it all. Mystery keeps it alive. This is not a method for the weak or insecure. In truth, the stronger and more confident a person is, the sharper this tactic cuts. Why? Because strong people are accustomed to control. They demand to understand. They live on certainty, dominance, and resolution. When you deny them that, when you refuse to fit their categories, you challenge their ego. You fracture their self-image. And suddenly, the strongest begin to act weak. They spiral, they grasp, they search for answers, but the law remains, never give closure. Let their mind cage itself, let their ego do your work, let silence scream louder than words. Power is not found in domination by presence, it is in haunting through absence. When you deny closure, you don't just influence emotions, you invade their reality. Every choice they make is shaped by the void you left. That absence becomes sacred, untouchable, almost divine. This is the highest transformation of Machiavelli's psychological leverage, from confusion to obsession to myth. For when a person cannot finish their chapter on you, they write a story instead. And stories live longer than explanations. Every person they meet after you is compared to the ghost of your silence. Not because you were flawless, but because you were never complete. You left before they could define you. You disappeared before they could dissect you. You stopped speaking before they could destroy your mystery. And now nothing measures up. The closure they crave becomes the prison they live in. And as they wrestle with why they cannot move on, they elevate your image higher and higher. They confess to others, "They were different. No one else made me feel that way. I don't know why, but I still think about them." These are not praises, these are symptoms of submission. For when someone defends your impact in your absence, they are no longer free thinkers. They are worshipping a feeling you engineered through silence. Had you given them truth, had you walked them step by step through your reasons, they would have understood, and understanding dissolves fascination, logic detaches, the spell shatters. But silence builds a cliffhanger, it withholds the ending. It dangles almost knowing, and almost knowing is far more addictive than knowing ever was. This is why closure is not just a mistake, it is self-destruction. If you vanish too cleanly, too neatly, they let go. You gave them the weapon to erase you. You became consumable, and that is weakness. Machiavelli's greatest warning, better to be remembered powerfully than accurately. When someone says, "they ghosted me," what they mean is, "they denied me closure, and I cannot forgive it because I still want it." Here lies the secret. Even hatred sustains your relevance. Even resentment is attention. The only sin is becoming forgettable. Machiavelli would call this strategic cruelty. You do not scream, you do not punish, you do not even say farewell. You vanish while they still care, and now they are locked in an endless cycle of checking, hoping for a signal, an answer, a reason. But nothing comes, and the silence grows louder than any confession. They hear it every night. Worse, they invent stories to fill the void. This law extends far beyond romance. It dominates politics, business, and social life. The rival who never learns your strategy collapses into paranoia. The worker you dismiss without explanation spends months repairing invisible mistakes. The friend you sever without conflict keeps watching your life from a distance, wondering if you ever remember them. The crowd you stop feeding hangs on your next word even more desperately, because absence wounds more than any speech can heal. Never offering closure means no one is ever finished with you, and if they cannot end the story, you remain the author of it forever. You need not be perfect, you need not be adored, you only need to be unresolved, to leave gaps so sharp, so charged with your presence that no one can fill them, no explanation can erase them. They will try, and the longer they try, the greater your power becomes in their mind.